Hi, welcome to the SGLM podcast. My name is Kevin, and today we have two distinguished guests with us, Geraldine Chin and Liew Nam Soon. So Geraldine is from ExxonMobil. She's the managing director there and also the chairman of ExxonMobil Asia Pacific. And Nam Soon, yourself, a regional managing partner of Ernst & Young, ASEAN. So welcome and thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having us here.
Yeah, thank you. Just to warm things up a little bit, I just want to ask you, can you briefly share from your earlier days, do you have any memorable early interactions with senior executives?
Yeah, for me, I can remember this distinctly well. It was my 10th year with the company, so I'm in my early 30s. We had a big major investment going on in Singapore. I was one of the most junior members of the team. And we had to do this presentation to not just the company president, but corporate level. At that time, it was not normal for somebody that junior to go in front of a corporate level executive. But my boss decided that it was okay for me to do it. So they brought me into the US, and this is going back like 30 years. So in a much more hierarchical organization, I had to do, they weren't sure whether I was prepared. So I had to present to the next level up manager. Then he had to say yes, do some adjustments, then go to the next one. So I had to have like a assessment test before I could go for the final exam.
Right.
So that for me was very, I would say very formative experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, there's obviously a few, but one of the more memorable ones was I remember when I first had the opportunity to lead a project. It was probably 20 years ago. I was in my kind of 32 or something like that.
Right.
I was doing a major systems and business transformation project for investment bank in Hong Kong. I had been based there for quite a number of years. And to cut a long story short, we had to present the project findings and obtain an approval to go ahead with the implementation, right, to the board itself. And I went in all prepared because I did a lot of research. I remember that weekend I didn't go back to Singapore and I just doubled down. And when I presented, it was a bit of a rude awakening because the board chair just went and flipped right through the end within the first 2 minutes. And because I had a lot of material, right? And I couldn't even get onto the PowerPoint presentation. And he very quickly said, so what do you want? And can you tell me how much incremental revenue are we going to get out of this? What are the cost savings going to be? And tell me what are the risks? Have you considered regulatory? Whole bunch of issues, I think, and we'll get into that, which I think when you present to someone at a different level, more senior level, they would be looking at not necessarily that the work and the effort that you have done, but actually outcomes and what do you want from them. And I think that I managed to do a quick recovery. I have to say we got it approved, but it was really left a deep impression on me.
So I guess it's something that probably surprised you and probably it was like an aha moment for you, right? A revelation.
It was very much so, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's actually very creepy, right? This Nam Soon, this first experience that I had, it was very formative. I actually didn't tell you the whole story, but it's very ironically, and we didn't prepare this.
No, we did not. Yeah.
I had almost exactly the same experience.
Right.
My big boss who was presenting first, the senior one just kept flipping through, right? Before you can finish even a quarter of the page, he flipped to the next one, he flipped to the next one. So I'm worried I'm up next, right? And I'm looking at it, I'm going like, oh shit.
Must have been scary.
Yeah, it was very scary.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he was very kind to me. I think he realized how junior I was. And he asked some really weird, from nowhere questions. I'm going like, how would I know? It was memorable because 3 weeks later, we didn't know, of course, they announced that Exxon and Mobil were studying to do a merger.
Right.
And that merger would have made our project irrelevant. So at that point in time, obviously he knew and he couldn't tell us. But it was such a scary experience. I remember calling my husband that night and going like, I'll be coming home in a couple of days, and if I don't have a job, I think I know why.
It can be very harrowing.
Yeah,
right?
It's very
those
harrowing.
First experiences, because you're trying to figure things out, and oftentimes if you have a coach or someone to kind of look out to, that might help. But we are often placed into these positions when there isn't one, right, to refer to.
So I think this leans very nicely into our first segment, which is understanding expectations, right? So you just mentioned that while it was scary, I didn't know what the bosses was looking for. Now, currently you are in a very senior position, both of you. What do you typically expect out of these meetings?
The basic expectation is that you've done your homework. It's crazy, right?
Okay.
But I have been in so many presentations where people just didn't do their homework. And that is, I'm sorry, really irritating.
Okay.
So we expect you to do your homework. Having said that, I've also seen the other extreme where people think doing your homework means you need to have thought of the 1,000 possible permutation of questions you could be asked and create, like 50 backup pages
Right.
to answer every possible question that can be asked.
Right.
So it's about making sure or trying to, my expectation is that when you come in and present, that you actually thought through the issue. You've looked at it from different perspectives, not all perspectives, but that you've looked through different perspectives, that you have thought through some of the basics, some of the different ideas, some of the different risks that you need to be looking out for. How are you mitigating those risks in what you're presenting to me?
Do you expect them to think like big picture, strategic at your level?
Of course not, because if you could think of that, you would be doing my job, yeah?
Right.
And we always know how to gear our expectations to the level of the presenters.
Okay.
So if somebody comes in and they're more junior, I have a certain level of expectation.
Right.
If their boss comes in to present the same material, I obviously have a much higher expectation.
Okay.
So we will know how to calibrate according to who's presenting the material. So I may actually not direct a question to the presenter. If I don't have an expectation that the presenter knows it, I may look to the boss and say, hey, I may direct a question to the boss instead of the presenter.
Okay, got it. Yeah. And Nam Soon, so I think most people go into senior executive meetings, right? They know what they want out of it. They want to force a decision, or they want to know what the boss is thinking, etc. But even before that, I think it's prudent, right, for most of us going to such meetings to find out exactly what are the expectations of the bosses and how do you actually do that? Do you have any advice or tips? Yeah.
Yeah, I think my role in the profession I'm in is quite unique because we have to cater to two broad sets of stakeholders, if you like, right? One is the internal one. So if I want to get incremental funding
Right.
For the business that I run from our global firm, how do I go about securing that funding? And then the other bit is quite honestly quite an ocean, because today we could be working with financial services client. The next day I could be seeing someone who's a SME Tauke, right, in Joo Koon Circle. And this is actually what happened this week. And it's quite broad and diverse. And each one of them could be a bit different, right? But I think there's form and then there's substance. I think when it comes to substance, and just to borrow a little bit of what Jerry talked about with regards to doing homework, there are a couple of things I think is really important in terms of doing that homework. One is to be very clear. You use the word force a decision. I wouldn't think is to kind of coerce to get them to think about where I'm trying to get the right decision.
Right.
But to be able to achieve that, it's really important to understand what is important for who I'm presenting to. What is the strategic importance for them, right? And for us, if let's say it's a client, it could be through prior interactions. Obviously, we don't see a client cold like that. Or sometimes if you have a client an overseas client, for example, you may not know so well, you require a bit of local knowledge, but also you could look up annual reports, you could look at websites, you could look at what the CEO or COO has been in the press, right, talking about, and then form a foundation in terms of what is really an idea of what is really important from their perspective. So that if the project is about, or the presentation is about securing support to go ahead with a certain set of recommendations, you kind of know, is that aligned to who you're presenting to, this strategically important for them, because they have KPIs, right? The other thing I think is a bit softer is the human element, because, and I've always found you got to almost mirror and really understand personality. So some people like to flip notes and go right to the end because they're very impatient. Others will be maybe a bit more kinder like Jerry, they'll look at, I really like what you said about, look at the person and the maturity and the seniority and then give them time. Sometimes you're lucky like that. But, do a bit of intelligence gathering, right? And in my line of work, I have to know all the board directors or chair or CEOs very well. But if you were someone perhaps starting out or a middle manager, you may not get that, right? So can you try to extend your network? Find out 7 degrees, 3 degrees of separation. Singapore is so small. Can we try to find out what this person is like in terms of personality? Couple that with the strategic understanding, I think that helps to present the case to be able to get the sign off that you're looking for.
And I think in my line of work, right, I do experience this thing called the meeting before the meeting. Yes, the pre-meeting, right? So where you actually try to suss out from certain, for no better word, proxies, someone who's close to, say, the chairman or the board of the board member, right? Or you do know from, say, for example, supervisory board, there's one particular person who would ask certain questions which may come across as quite difficult. And you get the hint from your CFO or your CEO who say, you better prepare properly. So I think, is that something that you guys see as quite typical as well?
I think that's exactly right. How we, in your CFO example, would be a coach, a friend, someone who can actually guide. Because I'm assuming the CFO would also like you to succeed, right? In terms of when you present something. So I think in our line of work, the pre-meetings that we have is enormous, right? Both social and official, because the more we can syndicate an agreement on what gets presented. And we always like to say, if you get to a steerco, it's really more of getting everybody on board with the decision, because a lot of the socialization has been done prior to that. Now, having said that, there's always going to be, it's quite, because whether it's steerco or boards, you have a lot of different personalities, and sometimes time just doesn't allow you to cover everybody. Maybe somebody else, one of them does not like to be covered, and and so I think is to be able to kind of be adaptable and agile and be responsive on the spot. And I think it would help if, back to kind of Jerry's point, that homework, the strong grasp of the fundamentals on the facts, that's always going to, so if some conversation I find always kind of goes the wrong way because someone bring them back to what is the topic about, what is factual about it, what decision are we trying to secure, and try to take some of the emotions out. I found that kind of help when you get into these tricky situations.
Right.
I guess also when you're presenting to steercos or to boards, it's not just the individual characters.
Right.
I must say, we are all characters anyway. We all have our preferences and we all have our care-abouts and what are our favorite topics. But also you have to watch the dynamics, right? So understanding the dynamics of how they interact with one another, especially in high-stakes presentation. Now, you don't do this for every presentation.
Yes.
But if it's truly a high-stakes presentation where it's a very critical proposal that you're trying to get through, or a study that's important, a strategy that you're trying to get alignment on and approval for, understanding the dynamics is also important, because you need to know who are the ones that are likely to support a particular idea, who are the ones that are going to not support it, and then the dynamics of, can you garner the support from the members that you think will support to help counteract the pressure? Because sometimes you will find that steerco members will help you and answer questions on your behalf.
Very true.
So the dynamics is also important. If you don't know the dynamics, it's okay. You just need to be conscious of it. Just conscious and watch the body language.
Yes.
I find that many presenters, when they come in, they are so focused on presenting the material and forget that it is inherently, as what Nam Soon says, it is inherently a human social process.
Right. And just speaking from my own experience again, you got to watch the nuances and the body language and be prepared to kind of pivot on the spot, because you come in with certain expectations, but all of a sudden the line of questioning changes and you have to, it's going from this to the board members or the C-suites are actually looking at more of this. They're more interested in the risks than, say, the returns, for example. And then you got to quickly pivot, right, but you got your slide decks, so you just need to wing it or just deal with it on the spot. Yeah.
You don't wing it. You are prepared.
Exactly.
You need to be prepared. You are prepared for the questions to swing into a different area. So you go like, okay, they're not interested or less interested in this. Since you asked, you can tell the board, since you're interested in the financial things, let us get to page 20, and then we can come back to this area if you're interested.
Okay.
And just be ready to pivot.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. I was going to add that the ability to read the room and look at the influencers, because you have a script, right, where you're presenting.
Yes.
And so to Jerry's point, they want to look at financials, but that may be one person, but the others are quite happy with what they're listening. They don't want to kind of jump to the financials. So, and then you have to take a decision. Do I say, give us some time, we'll come to that slide in a second, or is this person so important that is the alpha in the room?
Yeah.
You better go and settle that, and then you come back. So I think that's a judgment call that comes with experience, right?
Okay. Just broadening this topic, right? Obviously, Geraldine, you basically head up a multinational, ExxonMobil. Nam Soon, you head up a consulting firm, Ernst & Young, and both of you sit on boards of, I would say, government agencies, right? GovTech for yourself and PSC for you. Are there any differences when people go into these meetings, pitching to these different kind of organizations? I think you probably would know better than most of us. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can start on this one. I think there is a difference, without kind of generalizing. So public sector boards, stat boards, right? They do it for good, right? Citizens and delivering management. They're not necessarily looking at commercials. Whereas if you present to a ListCo, SGX ListCo, or a global firm, they would be looking at numbers, financials, and so on. So I think it comes back. If I like to go back to the point I made early on understanding the strategic importance.
Right.
And mission statement, right, of the company is important, because if you go into a board and keep pushing out on, well, if you do this, then you grow your business by X times. If I did that in GovTech, that's not going to work, right? Because that's not the point. But if I said, if we did this, and I suggest to the management team, you might want to look at these areas, because then you're able to kind of deliver, right, to a broader set of citizens, and they will get value from e-services and so on. Then it resonates, right? That's not to say finance is not important, but if you look at the balanced scorecard, whether it's a corporate or stat board, they tend to be a bit different. Then I think the other bit I would say is coming back to the organization culture and how they are set up, the DNA of the firm, because that's why I say it's a bit general, because even within stat boards, depending on who the CE, the PermSec, that might be a bit different, slightly different. If you commercial, for sure, that can be quite diverse, right?
Right.
So in financial services, for example, if I go to Bank A, Bank B, Bank C, sure, they're looking at process improvement, value creation and all that, but the risk appetite could be different. The decision to whether you want to be a fast follower or a lead innovator could be different. And so it's important to put that in mind when you kind of put the presentations across.
For me, it's not really a board, but you work with the public sector. But in my view, it's no different, right? As Nam Soon pointed out, you got to understand the culture of the organization, and not only the culture, but the norms in the meeting. So typically when you go in fresh, you just have to observe and try and understand what are the norms in the meeting. So typically public sector tends to be a little bit more hierarchical. You got to call chairman, call them by their title.
CE.
CE. Those are the norms, and you just follow the norms, right? You can't say, oh, pal, hi, call them by their first name. That's not the norm. So it's sensing the culture and the norms and just observing. And this is true regardless of sector. Social sectors have got their norms. Different companies have got their norms. Different divisions in the government have got their norms. So it all comes back to the same principle that you apply. Know your audience. Know the culture. Know the dynamics. Know the people. What are their care-abouts? It's no different whether it's public sector, social sector, or private sector.
Yeah, you could almost take the same playbook but just nuance it accordingly.
And I guess the difference also in terms of like decision making, I would think MNCs are more consensus driven. Consulting firms probably like managing partner calls, quite a heavy weightage.
Well, I'm not sure. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm managing them or they're managing me, because everybody has capital in the firm, so they all think that they are owner of the firm. So it gets very complex sometimes.
Okay. Now going on to the second segment, which is effective communication and style. To you, Geraldine, the question would be, how has your approach changed over the years, and what do you wish that presenters going into these meetings, right, would do more or less of?
Well, I hope my approach has changed over the years. Why? Because you need to learn, right? And as you learn, you change and you evolve. Businesses are also changing and evolve. I've had a very long career, not that young. And in the old days, you're a much more hierarchical organization.
Right.
Now organizations are more flat. So over time, you do have to evolve and change with the times.
Right.
So I hope I have evolved, I have changed. It didn't stay in my caveman era basis. But in terms of communications and so on and so forth, what do I wish presenters do less of? I'm in ExxonMobil, we're very engineering culture. Everybody is sort of willing to share reams and reams and reams of data.
Okay.
And as a senior manager, I'm very busy, and I don't need to go through your data. I need to know that you have looked at it, you've analyzed it, you've digested it, and extracted and distilled the insights. And so share with me your insights. Don't take me through this long grandmother story and go like, I started with this and I started with that, and when you see this data and all of that. Normally, if you are STEM trained, you tend to look at the data and then you do all your conclusions and then you reach your conclusions. Presentations are actually the other way around. You start with your conclusions first. What was the insight? What is it that you're trying to get me to understand or the decision? Then build back the structure to justify that. So you need to start with the end first and then work your way backwards from there. So that's what I hope presenters do more of or do less of. Besides, honestly, if you are presenting, and this is where audiences matter, if you are presenting to an internal sort of management or a steering committee, they have so much more experience than you do in the subject area. You don't have to take them through the subject area. They know it.
Right.
So building back up is actually sometimes very boring, and I probably know it better than you. So I would say start with your conclusion first and then build up why the key pillars. You don't have to tell me everything. What are the key pillars? What are the key leverage points? That's all I need to know.
So if I sum it up, right, it would be key points or main points, right? Then what's the impact to the organization? Is it impact in terms of risk or financials or strategic roadmap? And then your recommendation, 1, 2, 3.
I would actually go the other way around. What's my recommendation?
Right.
Then why am I recommending it? Why am I recommending it?
Okay.
I'm recommending it because of these are the key things. And then normally in business decisions, you have to address the risk and mitigation actions. So what is my risk? What's my mitigating actions? Then this is the final result that we're trying to get at. This is the P&L. This is the additional value that we're going to deliver to the bottom line.
Okay. So recommendation.
And then why?
The impact.
You're
why?
You're supporting arguments. And then the impact plus your risk and mitigating actions.
Okay. Nam Soon, so obviously you've come from, you manage ASEAN. You basically deal with a very culturally diverse group. And how important is it to adapt that communication style to fit this very diverse group of managers?
Yeah, I would say extremely important.
Right.
And I do spend a lot of time. We are a global firm, obviously, and I do also, whilst I manage ASEAN, I'm part of the leadership team that is in Asia Pacific. So, in fact, this morning we just had a 4-hour session with Australians, Japanese, Koreans.
Wow. And
then every quarter I'm on the global practice group as well. So we do have to interact with the Americans and the Europeans, right? So I think it is important, and we come back to ASEAN because if I were to want to get support in terms of getting a decision, support from my partners to go forward, say we were restructuring of the business. And the way I would interact with someone from Malaysia, in Singapore, obviously, we know there's a certain style and so on.
Yes.
But I always say what works in Singapore doesn't,
no,
most time it doesn't work anywhere else, because it's very fact-based, rule-based and all that. So you got to get comfortable, right, with understanding how would you get people on board, right? Culturally, how would you, again, it's form and substance, right? The substance could be, I'm trying to effect this change, but how you say it and present it to a Malaysian, it's very different to how you would take a Thai management team on board, or Vietnamese even. I think there's certain aspects that are common in the ASEAN culture, and we're quite proud of that, right? We always say we do it the ASEAN way, and we tell the Americans they don't understand what the ASEAN way is, but there is an ASEAN way. But still, it's very different. Like, you can't do the forceful approach and say, okay, I'm going to do these 10 things and it will work, right? Singapore, very fast, efficient and all that. So as an example, oftentimes when I have to get I think Singapore, Malaysia is probably a bit closer in terms of culture. If I have to get the Thais or the Viets along, it requires a lot more, I think, navigation and patience. And speak slower is one.
Yes.
You don't necessarily have to speak the language. Knowing a little bit will be an advantage, because it shows that you care enough to understand their cultures and norms and all that. But, it takes more. So, for example, I might spend more time to say, let's think about it, how we can curate this, and let's work it through, right? Like, Bapak, what's your opinion on this? And, give them an opportunity to also feedback. So a lot of time is, spend some time. I do every kind of offsite. I get them in, do a meet up for dinner the day before, breakfast, socialize. I break it up one-on-one. So if I know I'm getting resistance from this group, how do I tackle this group? And then, by the way, I've spoken to this group, and tell somebody else, and you kind of build that consensus. So in ASEAN, I think we got to navigate it. Now, again, if you go further ashore, and I know this group is also working in international firms like we do, colleagues and so on. You get on a call with Americans, you got to be able to talk some sport and some Jerry, you know that very well. A little bit, don't talk too much about politics, but again, if a Brit came and tell you, well, that's a good idea, why don't we think about it? That's his way of saying, actually, this is not really what I want. So how do you pick up those nuances? And I think that's really important for us if we have to be international managers. Or directors, we have to be able to read the room, understand the culture, to be able to navigate effectively.
I think you brought a very good point of trying to break up some of these groups, right? Because staying silent doesn't mean that they agree with you. And the fact that you use the fact of having a one-to-one, having breakfast or lunch or dinner to just get that inner juice from them, I think that's a very good tip. And one more thing that I notice is that Singaporeans, I think like what you mentioned, very rule-based, we can be somewhat direct, but yet sometimes also indirect. When you ask, do you have any questions? There's no questions. But more so for like the rest of ASEAN, the Thais, the Indonesians, they are a bit, maybe I'm generalizing, collectivists, right? In the fact that they may not be that direct. You need to be much more patient.
Yes. And I think just to expand that a little bit, we can be very clinical, right? We pride ourselves as being very efficient.
Yes.
We process the information, we get it done.
Yes.
But the ASEAN folks don't think like that. So in the breakfast and lunch, what I do is I probably spend, let's say it's an hour and a half of a meal. I would spend the first half an hour just talking about things that are life, right?
Yeah.
How's your children? How's it going? How's the floods, and that sort of thing. And then I think it's also important to try to get an appreciation of, well, I'm going to be presenting this. Do you have a concern about it? And it takes time, because you need to build up that trust. Because even if you ask it like that, a lot of times it's not in their culture. They don't know you to be so open and to just open up. So I think it's to coax it out of them and say, look, if we did it this way, how would it benefit you? That's what I think. But am I right? What are your concerns, right? And a lot of times when they trust you and you have that one-on-one, it's easier to, then you have an open room because they are not like, it's not a Western-based society where people just put up their hand and they in school, they are thought to kind of articulate and be provocative and everything else. But that's seen as rude almost, right?
So it's not to blindside them in a way.
Yeah, and it's to build that consensus and buy-in so that when we do go into the meeting, you don't get a surprise where someone just say, well, I completely disagree.
Okay. Okay.
But I like to just build on that, right? One of the learnings that I had working in an American company, we have certain assumptions on the cultural norms of Americans. They always put up their hands and they'll argue and they don't take, but actually they do, right? One of my biggest learnings on why I was consistently unsuccessful earlier in my career, trying to convince the Americans, is that they have their own ego and pride. In the Asian culture, is being respectful and trying to find out their position. But for the Americans, it's going like, I'm an important manager. How come you never come and consult with me and ask me first on my view? So the action is the same, pre-alignment. The reason may be different.
I see. Okay, that's interesting.
So you can't just project what you think the American culture is. You need to actually figure out within the company culture. Sometimes there are company cultures in American companies. There are cultures where it is important to show everyone respect by doing the pre-consulting or what the Japanese call nemawashi. And you think that that's characteristic of Asian culture but not of Western cultures. Sometimes that exists in the company.
Right.
It's a show of respect. So that's one. Don't ignore company culture. Don't ignore that for the same, that there may be different reasons, but you may still have to do the same thing. That's one. The other one is actually on an individual level. In a STEM culture, I deal a lot with people who are introverts. And for introverts, they are not prepared to speak up at the meeting. Sometimes they have to take what they're hearing and absorbing it and go into
digest it,
think about it. And very often you get much better ideas, but introverts need time. So you may not be able to conclude at your first meeting, simply because the introverts, no matter what culture they come from, need to go away, think about it, before they come back with their insights, their ideas, their responses, or their feedback. And if you don't open up an opportunity for them to give feedback subsequent to the initial presentation, you might run into resistance, right? They may say, no, I just don't think it's a good idea. But they need time to go and digest and then come back.
On the question of style, right? We were talking about that. Is it better to follow the style of senior executives that you're pitching to? Or is it better to bring your own authentic style? Quite an interesting question.
It depends.
Yes, okay.
And that's not a cop-out answer. I know it sounds like a cop-out answer. It really depends on the situation and the culture that you're in and the audience and the situation. We said earlier, right, inherently a lot of these presentations, many younger executives forget that it is inherently a social interaction. Many of us just think it's like, I just deliver what I'm going, facts and everything. It is inherently social. And with all social interactions, even today, we will mirror each other's postures. We will mirror each other's gestures because it's inherently social. And that's how you connect socially.
Right.
At the end of the day, these presentations is about connecting. It's about getting trust. It's about connecting.
Right.
And you do what it takes to connect. So to some extent, you have to mirror. You have to mirror postures. You have to mirror language. You have to mirror energy level. It's some cultures and some meetings is noisy, energetic, a lot of energy. Others, you need to be more calm.
More formal.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you put your authentic self at the door. You can bring your authentic self to the meeting, to the presentation, but you have to modulate that and you have to adjust it according to the situation in the room.
I can't agree more. I think on this one, Jerry's probably said it as best. I would say it's like a hybrid, right? You need to mirror and you need to be authentic at the same time.
Right.
I think that is so important if you want to get your point across and build some trust and some association, right, in terms of what you're saying and presenting.
Yeah, so I guess it's to kind of adapt to the room, right? Or adapt to the audience, while staying kind of authentic to your own style. And obviously, being authentic creates trust, like what you mentioned, right? A genuineness. And I think in general, you kind of perform better if you're just being yourself, right? It's no point trying to be something else.
Because it will become very obvious if you try to become somebody
very
else.
artificial. Yes, it's
Okay.
very artificial.
And guys, you guys will be very easily pick up these things.
That is so obvious. If you're trying to fake it, don't fake it.
Okay.
It's very obvious. Actually, what I'm looking for is, are you really passionate about something, right? You bring forward a proposal. Do you have any energy behind it? Do you truly believe in it? That is also being your authentic self, right? Bringing out your passion, your ideas. What are you, is this something that you truly believe in? And we can see that straight away. Is this something that you believe in or not? So being authentic to your feelings, being authentic to your objective is also important. It's not just about who I am, because a lot of times people talk about being their authentic selves, they mean personality. But are you being authentic to how you feel about the project?
Right.
That's also important because we can pick it up.
I was going to pick up a slightly, this situation sometimes I don't know Jerry's come across, but I've come across quite a few times, right? To the point around mirroring who you're presenting to. Let's say, sometimes you meet somebody who's antagonistic, not in a good mood, and just doesn't give you a chance to talk and just fires away the whole time. You don't get past page one and all that.
Right.
So you definitely don't want to mirror that, right? But the ability to stay calm, and be patient and bring that conversation back to facts if it's possible, or you may have to defer that meeting for another time.
Right.
I think that's also important. So it's a bit of a hybrid. It depends on situation.
Right. Since we're on that topic, right, have you had a situation where you've seen one of your juniors, navigate a very difficult meeting where there was a disagreement, and what did they do right?
We have a lot of these situations because we are almost all the time in our line of work presenting to different companies, different personalities and all that. And within that group that we present to, you also have, for example, senior management, right? The head of internal audit may have a very different view from the CFO, who has a different view from the CEO, for example. Right. So it does manifest in many different ways. Yeah. And oftentimes also, sometimes the disagreement between who we present to comes into that conversation, and you got to be careful you don't get caught in it, right? Because your presentation, your recommendations could be sound, but it's biased because somebody who supports it, the other person doesnn't like it.
Okay.
And so they're just going at it, but you get caught up. So I think it happens a lot, to be honest. And I think there are ways in which to kind of address this. One of which is really to kind of just try to center yourself, right? And try to, if it's very clear that there are some very strong personalities who are having a go at each other and it's not really about your work, it's best not to get
involved,
caught in the crossfire. Yeah. Let the conversation come to a point whereby you can interject and draw it back to the facts, right? And of what you're presenting. If there's, Jerry earlier on talked about, you might have somebody who, I've been in a few situations where I had a client complete the presentation for me. Not often, but sometimes it happens. Because they saw it and say, well, that's exactly what I want. Yeah. And actually it's my idea. And now I would just oh wow, fantastic, right? So that's good. Doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes. So, but if situations like that happen, you got to be able to adapt and look at the personalities in room and see. But again, staying true to what you're presenting, right? One of the most, I think, disingenuous things could be, and sometimes consultants go into that. You present A, the client says B, and it could be the same in the corporate, right? And then you say, okay, fine, I think it's B. That is terrible. Right? So you have to maintain your principles. You have to remain fact-based. You could nuance if there's something that is A plus B. Well, we didn't think about that. We'll come back, do a bit of analysis. We'll see how we can incorporate. But don't too readily, just take it and just change your your perspectives or your presentation, then it comes across as, again, not being factual, not being authentic, not being true to yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, there's very little I can add to what Nam Soon says, right? These are very awkward situations. So my advice is that stay calm, right? Don't get caught in the emotion, because you will feel terrible. You will feel absolutely terrible, especially if it's in a company and the two very senior managers are fighting. So you just need to stay calm. Very often you don't know what triggered it. Most likely it is some disagreement that they've gotten outside, and then they're bringing it into this meeting, right?
Yeah.
And it's best for you to stay away from that, because it's some grievances that they have with each other. Thoroughly unprofessional, unfair to you as a presenter, but don't dwell on it. You have to deal with the situation, just absolutely stay calm. But I also want to bring up this point that you said, right? Sometimes if you say A and then client says B and then you jump to that. I remember distinctly many years ago, we had this very senior manager. That was his favorite tactic. He will question you on a line of questioning to take you away from your recommendation. And he does it intentionally, very intentionally. He'll lead you down a different garden path.
Right.
Then
Wow.
when he's got you there, he will flip and say, but your original recommendation is quite different, isn't it? And
So it's like a trap.
Yes. Now, I don't see senior managers do that very often these days, but expect that sometimes this will happen. They want to test how strong you are on your recommendation. So you have to decide, how much do I stay on my recommendation? But you got to think on your feet. If somebody legitimately brings up an alternate viewpoint or a different point of view that you hadn't considered before, that changes the complexion of your recommendation, you need to be able to, that's why it's important to stay calm, to logically think about it. So one way to address this kind of situation is to say, hey, I actually really didn't think about it from that viewpoint. And try and explore with the questioner, what is driving that different viewpoint? Where are they coming from? What is their thought process? And you're not obliged to resolve it in the meeting. Says, well, we will go and take this on board and think about it a little bit more, and we'll come back to you. Right?
One thing that I learned over the years, especially I have pitched before and I was faced with some pushbacks, right, was to establish a common ground, right? Okay, you disagree, but we are actually both aligned on that this project is good for the company, strategically, etc. It's just that maybe, okay, you disagree on the execution point of view, etc. So I think once you draw back to that common ground, we like to call it, then it kind of helps diffuse the situation, right? And I'm just thinking, are there any other advice that you could recommend in terms of trying to diffuse a difficult situation within a meeting like this?
I think what you say is perfect, right? I mean, there are many things that you can disagree on. You need to focus on about what you can agree on so that you turn it into a more positive conversation.
Right.
Another one is come back to what is the objective of this meeting? Because very often these takes you down garden paths and rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And one way is to pull us back. What are we here for?
Yeah.
Right? What's our objectives? What are we trying to do?
Yeah. No, I think common ground and what Jerry said. And the other one is concerns, right? To the extent that you can tease out, and this is where the trusted authenticity comes in. Tease out what are the concerns. Why are you concerned about not doing this way or not doing this way? I think that is also building that better alignment of objectives. And if all else fails, then you probably need to escalate this and get some joint KPIs or something to get it done, you know?
Yeah, that's body language to whoever is the alpha, as you say, the alpha in the room, and help. And very often it's like your manager there, and they will know how to call a timer. Says, oh, perhaps it's a good time to have a break.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Or grab a coffee.
Yeah.
You need to actually have that sort of connection with the senior manager in the room or the alpha, and going like, if you need help, that they can read the room as well, and they will call a timeout.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Sometimes you need a fair parent. I always say that. In my line of business, there are 4 business lines, right? And Jerry will have the same. it's if you sit on top or even within your team, right? Even let's say you're not the CEO, within your team, you may be managing different teams who may have goaled differently. You have to be seen as playing the fair parent somehow.
Okay.
Right? So that people don't feel you're biased one way or the other, just to get that alignment again.
So on that note, right? So generally, do you think that we should, or at least the presenters or whoever's in the room, right, should attempt to resolve the conflict or the disagreement on the spot, or at least during the meeting, or kind of what we call it, take it offline?
It depends, right?
Yeah,
it depends.
depends.
Because
Depends.
sometimes if you like Jerry said, if you read the room, if you're not too far from resolution and you think, so it's a judgment call.
Yeah.
Because I also don't like to take things and say, well, let's resolve it, because the next time you meet could be a couple of weeks down the road, and then things could have overtaken by events and so on. So if we can resolve it, we resolve it. That's my preference. But sometimes it's not possible. But it's to kind of don't leave the meeting with just a simple say, we'll come back next time. Leave the meeting by saying, these are a few things, some kind of framework, right? That we haven't yet, these are the 3-4 points we have not yet resolved. And we need to do a bit of homework in point 4 and 3 and so on. We'll come back. And by the way, in the 2-3 weeks, we'll spend a bit of time, or I'll spend a bit of time one-on-one with each one of you, so that we can come, the next time we come, we have better alignment.
Okay, so
I think that's important.
You may not resolve it, but at least you have a way forward.
You have to have a way forward. Right? The worst thing is to kind of just stop and then we'll come back, because nothing will change after 2-3 weeks. Probably get worse because they have more time to build up their own argument. You know?
So I think we come to the last segment, right, which is the advice for continuous improvement. Obviously, we are here. We listen to your advice. I think it's all been very good. I'll just say, is there one practical habit that you will advise us when entering these meetings?
Entering or after the meetings?
Before, after, it's fine.
Once you've done your homework, it's just calming your nerves, especially if it's a high stakes presentation.
Right. So prep, extremely important.
I think prep is very important, because once you are prepared and you're prepared for things to go wrong and jumping slides and all of that,
you mentioned pivoting and everything,
and pivoting, then just don't work yourself up. I see so many people just working themselves up, and they do themselves a disservice, because I see the younger people, I talk to them, I know they're capable of doing it, and then they come in, they're so tense that they forget everything. So one way to get over it is just prep, right? Because once you feel prepared, you're staying calm. That's going into the presentation.
But maybe they prepared too much to the extent that they...
don't overthink it. That's why I said relax, don't overthink it.
Right.
You know, normally you're okay. You're okay.
Right.
So many people think that we're like ogres or some horrible people that are going to deduct points off in your next performance appraisal. Really, we're not. We're there for the same reason that you are. We're trying to make decisions, the best decision for the company or for the business. So you need to think, it's not that they're on the other side of the table than me. We're on the same side of the table. We have the same objective. We're trying to find the best project, the best answer, the best decision for the company to improve the business. So you need to think everybody's on your side.
I guess it's the fear of being judged, right?
Yeah. But actually, we're here for the business. If you have good management or a good board, we're focused on one thing. We're focused on the business. We're not really focused on you.
On you, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And to Nam Soon, I mean, the same point. I mean, from do you have any advice on the skills that young people can pick up to better prepare themselves for these high stakes presentations?
I think Jerry said it well with the preparation. Right? The preparation extends from the facts of what you're going to present and the work that you've done, so that you're confident to say, I've done a thorough analysis and this is what's good for the company. It's also about what we talked about earlier on, right? Getting a good understanding of what could be some of the concerns of the person you're presenting to.
Right.
So as much upfront you can get that intel will be really important, so you can anticipate what might be the challenging questions, right? And be very thorough in completing all the assessment of what that could be. We always like to do in our line of work a lot of trial presentations. So we'll get somebody who's generally one of the more difficult partners to act as a client, and just ask very difficult questions.
So like a role play kind of.
Like a role play kind of thing, but really challenging, sometimes even almost unreasonable, right? And test how our senior managers may respond in that sort of environment, or at least that's something that we do quite actively.
Okay.
And then I think the last part is probably for younger managers, I think, is if there's some role models, you can go to as many presentations as you can with others a bit more senior, the good ones, right? Actually, I find that every person has a different style,
right?
And you can almost, I find my old style has been an amalgamation of different people's. There's a core principle underneath that. There's a core Nam Soon, if you like.
Okay.
But, you asked Jerry earlier the question. I have, same like her, evolved over the years. And it's an amalgamation of different people I worked with. And part of that is because of the nature of business. We don't have fixed teams we work with. So I've had many good mentors along the way. I've also seen presentations that work really well and presentations that have gone so bad.
Yeah.
I just want to sing under my chair and disappear, but you can't, right? But so I think it's to find opportunities to learn from others, and if you have a role models, if you like that, and then evolve your own style, right? It has to come across as authentic.
And I guess since this is SGL and the target audience is predominantly Singaporean, right? Do you feel that as Singaporeans, most of us are probably very good technically? You mentioned about they do a lot of homework, they analyze to the T, they prepare slides. But when it comes to the actual delivery, the social aspect of the presentation, it's something that we need to work on?
I think generally so. I mean, I've seen a lot of young people and it is, they forget that actually what are you trying to do? At the end of the day, what are you trying to do? So I always used to train my younger people. The true test of a good presentation is if who you're presenting to leaves the room, gets into the lift with the big boss. And the big boss said, so what have you been doing in the past hour? And then and it says, oh, I was in this presentation. The lift ride is very short, 30 seconds.
Right.
What do you want your audience member to tell the big boss? What are the 3 things, and only 3 things? Because that's all he can say for the lift to get from the 10th floor to the ground floor. Then you think about, okay, this is what I want that audience person or the principal person that I'm going to, what are the 3 things I want him to remember from my presentation? That's actually how I build my presentations. I actually call it the lift test.
30 seconds.
The 30 seconds, if that person leaves the room, the decision maker leaves the room, and he meets his big boss, what are the 3 things he's going to say about what I told him? And you build everything around it. So that has a way of sharpening your presentation to exactly what am I trying to deliver here? What do I want? What do I want him to say? If my presentation is about an information and telling him something, what are the 3 key things he needs to know? If it's a decision point, then it's only one. What is the decision he's going to make?
Which is back to your point, right?
Yeah.
Recommendation first.
Yeah. Right. So I build all my presentations around the 3 things that I want him to say if he got into a lift immediately after my presentation meets the big boss. What are the 3 things? You can actually break it down, right? So when you say, okay, that's presentation as a whole, then you're looking at your deck. Slides, I'm sorry, but I see so many slides with so much of data and everything on it, which is okay. Sometimes you need a lot of data, especially in engineering. But what are the 3 things you want the audience to remember from that one page? Then flip the next page. What are the 3 things? And when you have got that down pat, you actually don't need a script. Because you see the page and there are only 3 things you need to remember on that page. When you talk about the whole presentation, there's only 3 things you need to remember. And everything just ladders back up to the 3 things. But actually, the consultants are really good at that. So, I find that in the companies, they're not as good at that. I think the consultants are really good at that.
I don't want to be too harsh in Singaporeans, right? Because, I think it's also our education system, how much exposure people have working with other nationalities and other systems and other styles. But I think generally I think managers should aspire to do is to, technically, Singaporeans tend to be quite good. The ability to associate events that are not necessarily technical that's where I think is something to kind of work on, right? So what do I mean by that? So sometimes, we consultants go into this presentation, but I also, a big part of my business is very technical in nature, audit, systems integration, very technical, and take out the strategy bit. They go in straight away, they say, okay, when's your RFP coming out? Here's my best system, SAP or whatever, without any sort of preamble, without any sort of context setting, without anything, or well, actually, what are you after, right?
Right.
Or, by the way, how's your weekend? And by the way, I read something, or last time we met, you said this was a key objective that for your business unit. And by the way, I now know why you're launching the RFP, because we talked about this before. And so or even associate with kind of the events, geopolitical events with tariffs, I'm using that a lot as well, right? To associate in terms of impact to their business. Why are you doing this way and so on? So the ability to think broader than just the immediate subject matter expert. So you got to be reasonably well read. You got to be able to do this association. And I think there are some cultures that do it really, really well.
Right.
And so how can we, as a nation, as a group, build on that strong technical foundation that we have to kind of extend? I think the other way around will be harder, right? If it's incredibly biased here, because I'm an engineer by training as well. But if you had a pure social type background and learning, if you're trying to build technical on top, it's different. But fact-based, and you're able to kind of extend association and kind of social networks, it becomes very powerful, I think.
That's very good advice from both of you, right? I think myself included, when I started off, you're wired in a certain way from probably by society, by the education system, to just cut to the chase, get to the facts, get to the KPI or whatever, deliver. But as you grow older through the hard knocks in the working world, then you realize that, hey, context is actually extremely important, and spend that time to build that social aspect of the meeting. We're going to close on a lighter note, so let's do a rapid round. So each of you would respond to one word from this sentence, right? I'll give the sentence. Maybe Geraldine, you start first. A meeting with senior executives will go well if
the senior executive didn't quarrel with their spouse this morning.
Be prepared.
Be prepared. Never enter a senior meeting without
a smile.
Without having gone to the toilet yet.
Good advice.
Good advice, right?
Then you can't be calm.
Look on your face as you're like, can you just make a decision? I need to go somewhere, right?
Oh, and make sure you have drunk water, or you're carrying water with you.
I love it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's nice. And the last one, your biggest learning from senior level interaction is?
They actually are quite kind, and they don't have as high expectations as you think they do.
They have a job to do, and really your presentation is going to help them come to a decision.
Right, that's nice. Yeah. I think that's very nice. Yeah, thanks very much for your time. And I myself personally learned a lot from this brief interaction, and I hope the audience as well would have good advice, good takeaways from this podcast. Thank you very much, and hope to see you again.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you next time.